Okay. So we pushed out the full release of 4.0 earlier this week, and we're about to push out a patch update. And the notes will cover what that addresses. Um, One of the topics I wanted to cover today are some of the changes between 3.0 and 3.5 to 4, and one of the major ones that I wanted to make sure got covered was the changes in how security is handled. Um, and so with that quick intro, Zach, do you want to take over?
Yeah, here I'll present my screen here. Just let me know when you can see my desktop.
I've got it.
Okay. So the first thing I'd like to point out is changes from 3.5 to 4.0 regard the authentication file, which is stored in VOLTTRON Home, your VOLTTRON Home auth.json. And what I wanted to point out, so here I have a VOLTTRON Home set up specifically for this demo at temp B. And if I do VOLTTRON control auth list, it'll show all the authorization entries. So these authorization entries are what allow other agents to connect to this platform. So here I have some user I just called Bob just so I can remember who they are, and then their curve key. And this is 3.5 format. So we changed the format of this under the hood in 4.0. And I'll show you what that looks like when it gets upgraded. So this is the 3.5 on the right. On the left, you have a 4.0 instance. So if I run with that same VOLTTRON Home, and I just run VOLTTRON and write it to a log, then I'll just close it and show you what the log looks like. It's a little easier this way. Sorry, it's not the easiest to read, but the important part I wanted to point out was that it says it created a backup because it does the upgrade automatically to the new format. So if something went wrong and you're not happy with the results, you can look at the backup. And it warned for this case that credentials with the .star format cannot be automatically upgraded. So that's the main gotcha. If you have any of those and you try to upgrade to 4.0, those particular entries are not going to carry over. So you'll either have to add them back in or rethink how you're going to do that auth entry. Any questions about that before I move on to the next upgrade? Gotcha. Okay, so the next, looks like there might be a message here.
Oh, that's once we get to QA.
Okay, so for now, yeah, I'll just continue unless I hear any other questions.
Okay.
So the next thing to point out is if you are upgrading from 3.0, there's we changed the way the keys are stored. So in 3.0 and earlier, we had something called a curve.key, which was in the VOLTTRON Home. And I don't know if anyone ever looked at it under the hood. You probably don't need to, but this is what it looked like, is just some basic 64 encoded key. So in actually 3.5 and on, we have a new key store format for storing keys. So if you have a platform and you already have your keys set up, you can use a script, run a script to convert your curve.key file to a key store format. So I'm here in the VOLTTRON directory, and I'll run this script called update curve key. and then I give it the path to the key I want to upgrade. And it says, okay, keys have been transferred to the key store. If you're curious what that looks like under the hood, it's JSON format that stores the keys. So then if you did that for your platform, this would normally be in your VOLTTRON home. So when you start up VOLTTRON, it's automatically, once you run that script, it's going to pick up the new key store and use that. Any questions about that?
So who here on the call has set up VOLTTRON deployments with security and handled all the keys and everything like that? I guess maybe that's a question, is who's already done this work and will need to do it again for 4? Yeah, Carl, expected.
Of them, but we won't be able to hit all of them. But it'll be enough that you understand, John, what's doable.
All right. So when you do get to that,
these are those bug.
we're getting some background conversation going on here. I think that's Terry's voice. Anyway, so when you get to setting up a VOLTTRON instance, especially for a real deployment, enabling all these security options is very important. And so if you have any questions on that, please don't hesitate to contact us. Zach has done a good job of improving the documentation. Zach, maybe could you pull up some of your new docs real quick just to show people?
Yeah.
Give them some context. Okay, Andrew. Yeah. So, what are you struggling with, or is it just in general setting up keys and everything?
I think I've been out of town this week, but I wanted to try to get on you guys' schedule maybe for early next week. But I'm still having some issues with communicating and authentication between nodes. So
okay.
Want to walk back through that one more time now that I have everything in place, that it should just work.
Sure.
Okay, for security documentation.
That'd be great too.
Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying if these new docs are available and I can work through those, that would be great as well.
Okay. So the way you get to there is volttron.readthedocs.io, and then under VOLTTRON Core Services, there's a VOLTTRON Security section, and this is kind of the roadmap to security and authentication related topics. But yeah, if you still have questions after this, yeah, feel free to reach out. Well, unless there are any other questions, that's all I have prepared to present.
Okay. Thanks for presenting, and you know you had to leave early, so thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll see you.
Okay. And so another topic that's it's also different in 4.0 has already been talked about a few times, but I was thinking maybe we would cover it briefly again, is the drivers. And Kyle, maybe can you summarize the changes in the drivers for 4.0, especially in regards to the config store, and show that script again, and then if there's any questions, we can dive into it in more detail, but otherwise we'll probably take it as read.
Okay. So the biggest difference between the old master driver and the new one is how it's configured. The new master driver, or the old master driver, you had to explicitly list out configuration files for each individual driver. This was problematic because there was nothing stopping somebody from coming along later and changing the driver configurations, and then the next time the master driver is restarted, those changes would take effect. and there was no central authority that said this is how the master driver is actually configured. So we implemented. So when we implemented the config store, the first agent that we had supported was the master driver. Now, instead of writing one big master driver configuration file that lists out all the drivers and all their individual configurations, now that is handled by the config store. So the new master driver configuration is very simple. It has a few core settings in it. And then the start and stopping of individual drivers is based on whether or not there's a configuration for it in the config store. There is complete documentation for how to interact with the config store, and the master driver documentation now includes a brief section on how to use the config store to put your configurations into the store. The only hang-up with this is that if you've already spent a lot of effort creating existing driver configuration files, they will not work with the new master driver configuration or with the new config store. So we've written a pair of scripts that will enable you to update your scripts from the old format to the new format, and then another script to automatically inject those new configuration files into the config store. You no longer have to shut down the master driver and restart it or anything like that. Anytime you update a configuration, driver device configuration in the store, the master driver automatically restarts that particular driver immediately. So, yeah, let's see. What do you want me to show, Jeremy?
Could you just show that script real quick, just so people have the...
Sure. Let me share my
Context on
desktop. Present desktop. You present preferences profile. Let's up this to 20. Okay. Close. Now, if you're going to interact with the config store, the platform needs to be running. So let's fire that up real quick. And on my bottom terminal here, we have the scripts directory that has two important scripts in it. So the first one is update master driver config.py. That takes your old scripts and turns them into new scripts. So let's see. Okay. All right. Let me delete my old device configurations so that they're not getting in the way. And then we will run an example here. And then let's see, so let's go examples, configurations, drivers. Let's update the obsolete configurations. And so the script needs the path to the old master driver configuration file, and then you just need to give it a target, configs devices. Oh, that's right. So I need to update the I had this ready to present last time, and then something else was wrong. Now I fixed the other problem, and now it's not ready to present. So anyway, you run that script, and it will create a bunch of configuration. It'll modify and update the configuration files automatically. And I should just give up on trying to present this thing because something goes wrong every single time. So assuming that the master driver agent was correct. In this case, the file is incorrect for my system. It's exactly what it is coming out of the repository. I have to change some paths to make it work on my system. Assuming that it's correct, you would run that command line, and it would, in the configs devices directory, it would create updated configuration files for you. And then in order to install them into the scripts. In order to install them, you would use this script right here, install master driver configs, and then you would pass it to the output directory of the previous script. And I'm not going to run it because it won't work because I didn't do the conversion. The conversion didn't work. So that will take the output of the first script and replace the contents of the master driver in the master driver configurations in the config store with the configurations that you've created. The reason we split it up into two steps like this is because we didn't want to encourage people to maintain their configurations in the old format. We wanted them to convert them once and then change the output and then make modifications to the resulting output, because those are going to be your new configuration files. If you want to update one configuration file at a time, you can use VOLTTRON control to put configurations into the store. So let's go into samples, configurations, drivers. And here we can see some example configurations that are already ready to go. So if we look at the new master driver configuration, like I say, it's pretty simple. This setting is actually not even required anymore. You can have a master driver configuration that's completely empty. Or you can just not have one in the store at all, and it will fire up and work just fine. The key is the most important thing in the old configuration file was the list of driver configurations, which is now handled, which, like I said before, is now handled by the config store. So if we wanted to put one of those configurations into the config store, let's look at backnet1.config. So you'll notice that there's no campus, building, or unit key value pairs in the configuration. That is because the master driver uses the path, or uses the name of the configuration in the store to come up with the path for the device. So to give you an example of that, let's do VOLTTRON. Typing is hard. VOLTTRON control config. All of the config store interaction happens with VOLTTRON control config. So we can list all of our configurations. And if we look, let's see, and let's list platform.driver. So there's all the configurations now that are currently for the are currently running for the driver. Right now I've got 3 registry files in the config store, but I only have 1 device configuration. So let's go ahead and add another one. In fact, let's add backnet1config. You'll notice that this configuration file includes the entire path, or the entire topic that that device is going to publish on, and that's important because that's how we make that determination. So when we go to put a new configuration in the store, platform.driver, let's see, so we give it the store command, we tell it we're storing a configuration for the platform driver, we give the configuration a name, so that would be devices, let's call this PNNL, let's see, let's go building 1 / and then we'll call it backnet1. just because it doesn't actually matter what we call it, as long the only thing that's important is that it starts with devices. That's how the master driver knows that it's going to be that this is a device configuration, is it starts with the prefix devices slash. And so everything after that is used as the path. So we do that, and then we give it the name of the configuration. So let's do backnet1.config. Its corresponding registry config is already in here. It's the backnet.csv, which is referenced right here in our backnet1 config. And that will go ahead and store it in the platform. Now the master driver is currently not running, so we'll see this warning message in the log that says, hey, we didn't actually have an agent to tell this configuration change about, which is fine. The master driver will pick it up when it is started up. So yeah, that's the new configuration system in a nutshell and a basic overview of how the config store works. Are there any questions? If somebody doesn't have their head wrapped around what I just explained, just speak up now, and we'll go over it. Ideally, in the future, the VOLTTRON control command line is not how you're going to be doing most of your interaction with the config store. Ideally, as the user interface comes online and we get that set up, especially for the master driver, a lot of that's going to happen through VOLTTRON Central Web Interface. So that's a feature that we hope to have out in one of the other releases of VOLTTRON later this year. Although this is nice, the VOLTTRON control interface is nice because you can script the installation of configurations into the store with a bash script. There is also you can also write a script that creates a temporary agent that does the same kind of thing. And if you're putting lots of scripts into the config store, you might look at how we do it in let's see. Oops. You might look at how we do it in install master driver configs, because that script is optimized for performance to an extent. And one of the things it does is it creates a temporary agent to do all of the communication with the config store, and that turns out to be faster than writing a bash script that uses VOLTTRON control, because VOLTTRON control has to establish a new connection to the platform every time, and if you're trying to install like 1,500 configurations, this is kind of slow. I mean, it's not like super slow, but it could be faster. And so install master driver configs becomes a nice example of how that's done. The other thing is, if the master driver is running, when you are updating configurations, it takes slightly longer for each configuration to be put into the store. Each configuration change in the store is considered an atomic operation. And so until all of the changes for adding that configuration into the store are applied on the master driver, it won't return. And we do that so that so when people are using the config store in their agent, they can be assured that there's no race conditions with the order that configurations are processed and things like that. So taking that into account, if you're like installing 2,000 configurations into the master driver and you want it to happen faster, it's taking too long for whatever it is you're doing, you can shut down the master driver, push them all out, and then start it back up, and it will not miss a beat. Are there any? Okay, so I hope that anybody who wasn't satisfied with the explanation we got last time understands it better now.
Oh, and hey, Kyle,
Yeah.
you want to mention the starting up VOLTTRON with DevNull?
Oh, yes.
That's rather important.
Yes, it's in the documentation, but if you haven't read that part of documentation in a long time, you're going to miss it. So one of the things that we discovered, kind of on an accident, recently, and I'm going to pull it up in the doc. Actually, Jeremy, do you know where it is in the documentation? It'll take me a second here to find it. We could race.
I think it's off the. It's in the install page now, isn't it?
Is it on the install page?
It's in several places.
Yes, we tried to make sure it did not get missed. Let's see. There's getting install. Let's see. Deployment advice. Here we are. And then let's see. Deployment options. Okay, so I go into it in the most detail on this page right here. But the short version is if you set up Voltron as a service, you'll either use systemd or you'll use a program called start stop agent. And what both of those do is they will automatically redirect standard error and standard out to dev null, which is something that you actually need to do. Now, we try and capture everything to the log that would normally be put in standard error and standard out, but it's actually not possible to do it the right thing in every situation. One of the libraries that we use writes directly to standard error, and we just kind of threw our hands up in the air and said there's no way to fix this completely in every case. So what that means is something that you should be doing anyway is when you go to run the platform from the command line and you want to run it in the background, use let's see, paste. Use this command line here. So originally we had see, I'll go ahead and run that. So originally we had advocated doing this right here as one of the options. This does not redirect standard error and standard out to dev null. Now normally this is not a problem until you do the next step, which is the next step for a long-term deployment is to run disown. And what disown does, if you're not aware, is it disassociates the Voltron process from the terminal. So if I didn't run disown and I close this terminal, the Voltron process would end. If you really want to start in verbose, but yeah, only during testing. That's a good point. I always turn on very verbose because I'm always developing, so it's habit. So if I don't disown this and I close this terminal, Voltron will close. And so, you know, I want to run this, so I want to leave it going after my terminal closes, so I'd run disown. If I don't redirect standard error and standard out to dev null, it actually causes the installation of agents to fail, because one of the libraries that we use for that process tries to write to standard error. That produces an IO error, which causes the process to fail. It's very annoying. So if you redirect standard out and standard error to dev null, that fixes that problem. And everywhere that we talk about deploying Voltron, we are sure to bring this up. So it's in the documentation all over the place. Yeah, it's Python wheel that causes the problem. Shame on them. Just kidding. We like wheels. Let's see. So I'll go ahead and disown this. And so now we're in the clear. Once you disown it, there's no way to shut it down without either using kill or Voltron control. So in case you've forgotten how to do that, it's Voltron control. Let's see, minus shut down, and then
Voltron control shut down dash platform.
That's right.
Because if you leave off the dash platform, it shuts down all the agents.
Yes.
But leaves the platform running.
Yeah, I knew that didn't look right. Thank you. So now that will go ahead and kill it. So that's an important thing that we've discovered in the last 2 weeks. Yeah. So if you're running it in the background and if you intend to disown it, be sure to redirect your output to standard error. We would love to have that fixed and not have to worry about that, but the libraries that we rely on don't quite play nice. So yeah.
All right. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, also in the documentation, so the page that I linked also now contains recommendations for how to deploy, and we have examples. So calls out example scripts that we have for deploying it as a service in a systemd and in an initd environment. That is a tongue twister. So if you want Voltron to start up automatically when your Linux platform restarts, we've got instructions for how to do that now.
Yep, and so if you set up Voltron using those scripts, and if you install your agents and enable them, then you'll never have to worry about starting your agents up manually or starting the platform up manually. Enabled agents will start when the platform does. And I think that actually leads into the question that Omri asked. So if you want to make sure an agent starts after another agent, the command to use is Voltron control enable the agent's UUID, then -p priority. And so you could do something like that. And if you wanted that agent to start first, if you wanted to start an agent, make sure that it was the last thing that came on, then you could do a 1.
Okay. Sure. How do I get the routes sorted in proper order? Okay.
So if you want to make sure that Voltron Central or that your agent starts after other things, then go ahead and do that.
Yeah. This might be exposing my ignorance to the master web service, but I guess I don't understand why you would need to register your routes in a particular order. Shouldn't they all be unique? Or are you doing something where you are doing something that kind of steps on the toes of Voltron Central?
Still there, Omri?
Yeah, if you're still there, Omri, I'm just curious because
yeah, I'm trying to get the mic. Let me see.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that if the agent I'm starting up, which presents a web interface for its own reasons, that when somebody clicks a link to a URL that's supposed to be served by my agent and not by Voltron Central, it doesn't get mistakenly routed to Voltron Central.
Oh, are you having a problem with that?
I just wanted to know a priori.
Oh, okay.
And if agent startup order is enough to take care of it, then we're good.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, so Craig is not on the call, and he
would know the answer to that right off the top of his head.
Yeah, so I'll send this to him, and he'll get it Monday, and then we can double check.
That Craig spending time with his family.
Okay, let's see. The other topic I wanted to touch on, just as I know we've covered, it's another one we've covered before, but I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of it again. Chandrika, are you on the line yet? Could you talk about the aggregator real quick, just to remind people what it is and how they could use it?
Sure.
Thanks.
I don't have my environment running to show you because I was working on documentation, sorry. But I can talk about it. Essentially, Aggregate Historian is a new agent that you could run essentially as like a background process. It will query the data that's already been collected by Historian, and it can compute aggregates and store it in a separate table in the same database. So if you're using Mongo, it'll query the Mongo Historian, data collected by the Mongo Historian, compute any aggregates that you configured it to, and then put it into separate tables so that you can query using the existing query APIs. The existing Historian query APIs, I've added there's two new parameters which accepts a aggregation type and an aggregation time period, and you can pass those two to it and say, okay, give me monthly averages of point A or point B points, or point A comma B comma C, where if you're say doing an average of a single point across multiple devices, you could do that as well. So you could do, but this is not a dynamic feature. It's something that's going to it's going to collect in the background and store it in a database so that you can query it later. So it's not going to, you cannot say, oh, give me 20-minute averages if Aggregate Historian is not already configured to collect a 20-minute average. So this is essentially like something if you want to do, you know that at the end of the year I'm going to be needing a monthly average of something, then you can do that and keep collecting it as the data comes so that by the end of it you can quickly get it. So that's what the Aggregate Historian does. Do you want me to show the configuration?
Yeah, the configuration and the point, just showing the documentation too.
Just a minute. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so it's loading. And I'm going to bring up the configuration. Let me know whenever you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so this is an example configuration for the SQL Aggregate Historian. Since this is based on the data that's already collected by your regular historian, so you're going to have one Aggregate Historian for each corresponding historian. So there's currently there's an SQL Aggregate Historian and a Mongo Aggregate Historian. The first set of parameters is essentially the same as what your historian has. This is like the connection details to your database, and then followed by your aggregation details. So you could have multiple aggregation groups. Each aggregation has its own aggregation period. So you could have aggregate by minute, hours, weeks, or month. And these time periods can align to a calendar time frame, or it could be like real time. So if you say 1 hour averages, it can be 1 hour average from 12:15 to 1:15 today, or it could be like it can align to the clocks, like 00 hours to 01 hours, then 01 to 02 hours. So and similarly, if you say weekly averages, it could be like if you say real time, then it is like today to last Friday to today would be 1 week, or you could say Sunday to Saturday is 1 week. So that's what this parameter align use calendar time period means. It's a Boolean variable. And then for each time period, you could have a set of points. And for each point, it has a list of topics. You can have one or more topics. You can specify the aggregation type, and then the minimum count that should be there. Like, for example, say, compute the average only if there are like 60 records in an hourly period or 50 records in an hourly period. If it's below that, then I do not have enough data to have a correct aggregate. So you could skip that time period. It'll just skip it and then do it for the next time period. And whatever aggregates that you provide within a single element of a point, these would be like time synchronized. So you could say, okay, give me average, hourly average of a point A and hourly average of point B, and both would have the same time steps. So when you query it back, you can query, say, okay, give me hourly averages of point A comma B, and you would have the timestamp values synchronized for point A and point B's data. That's pretty much it. Any questions?
Okay. And maybe, do you want to talk briefly about the work that you were doing with Hung on queries?
Okay, yeah. We did do some performance testing with the query APIs. We modified the queries to improve the performance more. But we still have scope to improve, especially when it is through the remote API, because we're not really doing any parallel. So if you have multiple, say, asynchronous AJAX calls, it's going to be slower. But if you do a single query with multiple topics, now that you have ability to query more than one topic using the Historian Query API, it should be faster. And we updated the queries to use the latest aggregation framework in Mongo, and we found that to be faster than the earlier find queries that we are using. So yeah, but we're still running performance numbers for a different schema, where especially for Mongo, and we're testing mainly to see how to get aggregate data over a bigger time frame, like monthly data or yearly data, which would currently be slower, but that's something that we're working on.
Okay, thanks. Could you bring up the aggregator documentation?
Sure. Read the docs. I don't. It's probably in core services, right?
Oh, you had it in your search bar, I think.
Oh. Remember the.
Yeah, and we're still working on reorganizing this.
The tree on the left, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is specification based on which the code is built. So this gives this documentation gives use cases. So if you want to do this, how do you do it? If you want to do it, so it gives you example use cases and the corresponding configuration file, and also it gives you examples of how to query it. So, for example, this is the update that I was talking about to the query API. In the new version, VOLTTRON version, you have 2 additional parameters. So you have an aggregation type and an aggregation period. You can say, okay, give me weekly averages for a single point or points. And that's how you do it. So this is a good documentation to refer to see, okay, what's doable with this. So I can post this to the chat window. And there is API docs as well. So under API docs, services, aggregate historian, you can see the actual API documentation under this. This as well. Any questions that I can answer?
Okay. Yep, and if people start using this and have questions, definitely just let us know. We're going to be using this in-house for our own uses, so we'll hopefully get people outside using it too. So one thing that I wanted to mention that we're starting to work on now is allowing for tagging of data points. I know this is of interest to people on this call, and see, Olga had presented some of her data model work here before. Now we're looking at how to actually implement it in VOLTTRON. And Chandrika is writing up a spec on that, and when that's available, we'll put it out for everyone to take a look at. But basically, the idea is, right now, if you want to find topics, you have to hope that there's information embedded in the topic string. And what we'll be building is basically a tagging service that'll let you associate tags with topics so that you can say, give me all the HU topics, or give me everything that has a parent of building 1 or something like that, so that it's easier for an agent to bootstrap itself, for one. So if I just have an agent that starts up, it can say, give me all the outdoor air temperature topics, and it doesn't have to know ahead of time where those might be or what their naming convention is. It just looks for that tag. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. It should definitely make things more dynamic and easier to find.
Hey, Jeremy.
Uh-huh.
Hey, it's Nigel here.
Yep.
That's great that you guys are working on rolling out that tagging tool.
Yeah, and you're definitely one of the people I want to run that by.
Yeah.
When you get
Thanks for bringing it up. What's the rough timeline as far as like the being able to incorporate that into the platform? Is it like something that we can expect for next year? I just want to know how much work, if I should devote any work in my project planning to, developing something like this, if it's going to be a year or...
No, so we're starting on it right now, so I would hope early next year.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in the process of speccing it out right now.
And the goal is, so I know you have the machine learning for figuring out what the unhelpful names from the building management system map to.
Yeah, so I was wondering how that integrates, or is this tool that you guys are talking about a fully manual
yes.
tagging process?
Yeah, so this will be fully manual. We're not gonna, we will provide services that will allow people to build slick UIs on top of it, or use tools like what you've developed to automate the process and make it better.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we don't want to reinvent any wheels, and we don't want to, step on anybody else's research or whatever. We want to provide services that let you use those capabilities in the platform.
Oh, that sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I definitely would like to see your machine learning thing work.
Yeah,
with this.
Actually, I've been testing another one that was developed at the United Technologies Center, I think it's called.
Oh,
is that
UTRC?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm just working with that, and it seems to be using some of the same machine learning methods that our group worked on. So I need to see if I can sort of take the best of both.
Yeah.
But I just wondered if that was anything that you guys were looking at.
I
testing.
think, what's the name of it?
It's called the BAS Inference.
Okay, yeah, I don't think I've played around with that.
Okay. Just throwing it out there.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
So you guys know.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to let people know that was going on, and we'll, as soon as we get a spec, we'll present it at the office hours. And then while we were talking, I thought of one more thing that Kyle needed to mention. That's a change in 4.0. So we'll do that, and then we'll open it up for questions, or probably just be out of time.
Well, this is really simple. So if you are scheduling a device on the aggregator agent, one of the things that was part of the interface, which I will tell you right now, it was my design and it was terrible. One of the things that you're supposed to provide is the ID of the agent, or give yourself an identifier for your agent for the task. So you have an agent name, a task ID, and then a list of subscriptions that you want to provide, or that you want to request. Well, what we've finally got around to implementing was the fact that we can actually detect who does an RPC call in general. That's just a feature that's available. And so that first argument to give an identity to your request is actually not needed. And so what we've done is the new implementation of the actuator agent now actually ignores that first argument to the schedule request, and it looks at the VIP identity of who made the request, and uses that for associating it with an agent. So whenever you also do get and set calls or anything like that, or actually when you do a set call, I think, yeah, you include it when you do a set call too. So anywhere where the agent ID is expected, now we just ignore that argument. In a future version, that interface will be deprecated, and we will create a new one that's missing that argument. This makes it more secure now, because in the current situation, it's very easy to spoof an agent that has a device scheduled. You just have to watch. There's just things that get published on the message bus that you have to watch for. I mean, it is very trivial if you have an agent that is up to no good to send control signals to a device that it has no right to. So right now, everybody's kind of on the honor system. With the new interface, it will actually be enforced. And with the new changes, it's enforced now as well.
Yeah.
Is that what you were going to say?
Yep. So
okay.
No problem.
All right.
All right. Well, so that was a bit of a brain dump.
Isn't every office hours a brain dump?
A little bit. So along those lines, I'd still like to encourage people, if you have questions that you want to make sure get covered at the office hours, or if you would have work that you would like to present, please email us. We'd love to see more presentations of what people are doing with VOLTTRON. And then this also provides you with a good opportunity for other people to notice your work. At the technical meeting that we had a couple months ago now, there was a lot of good connections that were made, I thought, and so I'd really like to also use office hours as a way to continue that. So just throwing that out there. Okay. So if there's no quick questions, I think we're out of time. As always, contact us on email if you have things you want to ask us. Otherwise, we will see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, guys.
Yep, thanks. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.